The gym smelled off. Mr. Henderson, the gym teacher, noticed it immediately as he entered. The stale, almost metallic air clung to his senses, making him uneasy. A cluster of students stood huddled near the far wall, their whispers sharp and nervous. He approached, heart quickening with every step. "What's going on here?" he asked. No one responded. They simply parted, revealing a rolled-up gym mat lying on its side. A pale, lifeless hand dangled from one end. Panic surged through him. "Get back," he barked, but his voice cracked. He knelt, trembling, and pulled back the mat. Inside was Kendrick Johnson, his body contorted and face swollen. His eyes were half closed, his arms bent awkwardly, as if they'd tried to resist something. Bruises marred his face, stark and unmistakable. "Call 911, he shouted, his voice breaking through the gym's oppressive silence. Yet, nearby, an administrator moved with unsettling calm, dialing on their phone as if ordering lunch. Something about their nonchalance sent a chill down his spine. Within minutes, the gym became a storm of chaos, students sobbing, teachers shouting for order, and officers streaming in. As Kendrick's body was carefully moved, rumors began to ripple among the students. "Did you hear about the fight?" One murmured. "I saw him arguing with them last week," another whispered. Henderson caught fragments of the whispers' tales of conflicts Kendrick had with certain students, names that seemed to linger in the air like a threat. When the coroner arrived, they glanced at Kendrick and muttered something under their breath before exchanging looks with the administrator. It wasn't panic. It was something else. Something colder. The rumors swelled into a wave of questions no one dared answer. Who had been in the gym that day? And why wasn't anyone panicking, truly panicking, over what had just been found? Questions grew louder in the gym, but no answers came. All Henderson could think was, "This doesn't feel right." The initial police report was swift and oddly confident. Kendrick's death was ruled an accident. They claimed he had climbed into the gym mat to retrieve a shoe, gotten stuck, and suffocated. The explanation felt shallow, even rehearsed, but the case was closed almost immediately. Kendrick's parents, Jackie and Kenneth, couldn't accept it. "My son didn't just fall into a mat and die," Jackie said, her voice trembling but firm. She demanded answers, and the cracks in the official narrative began to show. The autopsy results raised more questions than they answered. Kendrick's face was severely bruised, his jaw swollen, and his neck showed marks that didn't align with a simple accident. Jackie noticed something else. When she saw her son's body, his fingernails were broken, as if he had been clawing at something. Yet the gym, where his body was found, was strangely clean. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Determined to uncover the truth, the family commissioned a second autopsy. The results were devastating. This time, the cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the neck. The findings directly contradicted the official ruling, sparking outrage and disbelief. Then came a horrifying discovery that sent shockwaves through the family. At the funeral home, the mortician revealed that Kendrick's organs were missing. In their place was newspaper, hastily stuffed into his body. "Who does this?" Kenneth demanded, his voice breaking. "Who mutilates a child and covers it up?" The family took their fight public, demanding justice and an explanation for the missing organs. Meanwhile, whispers of a deeper conspiracy began to circulate. Why was the case closed so quickly? Why were key details overlooked? As public pressure mounted, they uncovered yet another twist. The school's surveillance footage from the gym was incomplete. Hours of footage were missing, conveniently aligning with the time Kendrick was last seen. Who erased it?" Jackie asked during a press conference, tears streaming down her face. "Who's trying to bury my son's truth?" Investigators claimed the missing footage was due to a technical glitch, but few believed it. The gaps in the timeline became a gaping hole in the narrative. Every step forward only led to more suspicion. The funeral home, the autopsy discrepancies, the edited footage, each revelation felt like another brick in a wall of lies. Jackie and Kenneth refused to back down. "We won't stop," Kenneth vowed. "We won't stop until we know what really happened to Kendrick." But the deeper they dug, the more dangerous their search for answers became. A chilling pattern began to emerge. Someone was determined to keep the truth hidden, no matter the cost. And then came a cryptic message, scrawled on the back of a flyer left on their car. 3 words, hastily written but impossible to ignore. "Drop it now." Jackie clutched the note, her hands shaking. "They want us scared," she said. Kenneth nodded grimly. "But they don't know us. We're just getting started." Kendrick Johnson was a bright, driven teenager with a passion for sports. He excelled as a student athlete, earning respect from his peers on the basketball court and football field. But he wasn't just an athlete. Kendrick had a quiet determination, a fire in him that his parents always admired. He spoke about his dreams of playing professional football, about giving back to his family, and about being someone the world would remember. But high school wasn't always kind to Kendrick. He had a reputation for standing up for himself, a trait that didn't sit well with everyone. He often clashed with 2 particular students, brothers whose father was a prominent figure in law enforcement. The tension between Kendrick and these boys wasn't new. It had been brewing for months, starting with a heated exchange in the cafeteria and escalating into open hostility. One incident stood out. A fight in the school hallway left Kendrick with a bloody nose. Witnesses said the brothers had taunted him, but when Kendrick pushed back, they threatened him in ways that made others uneasy. "This isn't over," one of them had reportedly said. But nothing came of it, not a suspension, not a warning. The boys' connections kept them untouchable. For Jackie and Kenneth, these memories resurfaced in the weeks following Kendrick's death. Rumors swirled that he had been in a confrontation on the day he went missing. A few students hinted at seeing him near the gym bleachers with the brothers, their voices raised, but no one would confirm it outright. Fear kept them silent. The Johnsons became relentless in their search for answers. They filed complaints, contacted the media, and spoke at rallies, demanding accountability. Their grief was raw, but their resolve was unshakable. Jackie's voice cracked during interviews, but her message was clear. My son's life mattered. We won't stop until we know the truth. Despite their efforts, local authorities seemed determined to stonewall them. Evidence was mishandled, requests for information were delayed, and key witnesses refused to speak. At times, it felt like an invisible force was working against them, keeping the truth just out of reach. Then came the first real break. A former student contacted the Johnsons anonymously, claiming they had overheard a conversation involving Kendrick. The student, speaking in whispers, described hearing Kendrick confront someone about a secret. He said he wasn't going to keep quiet, the student explained. He said people deserved to know. When Jackie asked what the secret was, the line went dead. The family's frustration grew. The more they pushed, the more resistance they faced. Local officials dismissed their concerns as baseless speculation, while the brothers in question were quietly transferred to another school. The whispers of a cover-up became louder. And then another tip came in. A classmate of Kendrick's revealed that he had been followed home from practice several times in the weeks before his death. He thought he was being watched, the student said nervously. I told him to be careful, but he just laughed it off. Kendrick wasn't the kind of guy to back down. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they painted was chilling. Kendrick's determination to stand up for himself, to do what was right, might have made him a target. And as the Johnsons dug deeper, they began to realize just how powerful their son's enemies really were. The anonymous tips kept coming, but they were always fragments, whispers, half-truths, vague statements. Kendrick's parents, fueled by grief and determination, pieced together what they could. Then, one day, Jackie's phone rang. The voice on the other end was hesitant, trembling. "I saw what happened," the caller said. "I saw Kendrick that day." The caller explained that they had been near the gym when Kendrick got into a heated argument with one of the brothers. "It wasn't just yelling," the caller whispered. "It was a fight." There were others there, too. When Jackie pressed for more details, the caller grew quiet. "I can't say anything else. I don't want to end up like him." The call ended abruptly, but the details matched other testimonies the Johnsons had gathered. They now had a clearer picture. Kendrick had been in the gym with people who had reason to harm him. But why was the surveillance footage incomplete? Why were hours conveniently missing? That's when they met Samuel Grant, a retired private investigator with decades of experience. He approached the family after hearing their story and offered to help. "This case stinks," he told them. "I've seen a lot of things in my career, but this reeks of a cover-up." Grant dug into the surveillance footage, analyzing every frame. He found something chilling. Frames had been deliberately cut out, leaving gaps in the timeline. "This wasn't an accident," he explained. "Someone erased this footage on purpose." The investigator also uncovered inconsistencies in the official reports. The time of death listed in Kendrick's file didn't align with the timeline provided by witnesses. Blood samples collected from the scene were never tested, and key pieces of evidence had gone missing. Then, Grant found something even more damning: a witness who had been in the gym that day. The witness claimed to have heard an argument involving Kendrick and two names they refused to repeat. "I heard them say, 'He needs to learn his place,'" the witness said. Then there was a loud noise, like something falling. But when Grant pushed for more details, the witness shut down. "I can't," they said, visibly terrified. "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Meanwhile, the Johnsons received an anonymous package. Inside was a photograph, a blurry image of Kendrick near the gym bleachers, his face tense as he seemed to argue with someone out of frame. Attached was a note written in shaky handwriting. "You're looking in the wrong place." The package rattled Jackie and Kenneth. "What do they mean?" Jackie asked. "What are we missing?" Grant had his suspicions. He theorized that the gym mat had been moved after Kendrick's death, staged to make it look like an accident. "This wasn't just a fight," he said. "This was calculated. And whoever did this had help." As the family pushed for the case to be reopened, public protests erupted. Crowds gathered outside the school, demanding justice for Kendrick. The pressure mounted, and authorities begrudgingly agreed to revisit the case. But just as progress seemed within reach, Grant received a chilling warning. An unmarked envelope was left on his doorstep. Inside was a single note: "Back off, or else." Grant showed the note to the Johnsons. "They want to scare us," he said. "But they're underestimating how far we're willing to go." The Johnsons, now more determined than ever, knew they were closing in on the truth. But with every step forward, the danger grew. Someone was desperate to keep Kendrick's story buried, and they were willing to do anything to make sure it stayed that way. The Johnsons braced themselves for what was coming. They weren't just fighting for their son anymore. They were fighting against a system determined to silence them. The Johnsons were running out of patience, but the pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together. Then, one evening, another package arrived at their doorstep. This time, there was no note, just a USB drive. Jackie hesitated before plugging it into her laptop. Kenneth stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder as the screen flickered to life. The file on the drive was a video clip. It showed the gym, its grainy surveillance footage unmistakable. For the first time, they saw something horrifying. Kendrick, alive, walking toward the mats. Then, two shadowy figures followed him. The video cut off abruptly. "Why didn't we see this before?" Kenneth muttered, his voice low with anger. "This proves they're hiding something." Samuel Grant examined the footage and confirmed their worst fears. The clip had been intentionally spliced, likely by someone with access to the school's security system. "They're covering their tracks," Grant said, "but they've left just enough for us to work with." Then came the breakthrough they had been waiting for. The investigator uncovered evidence that the gym mats had been moved after Kendrick's death. Photographs from the original scene contradicted the final police reports. Blood evidence on the mats was ignored, and the way Kendrick's body had been positioned didn't match the so-called accident theory. This was staged, Grant concluded. Whoever did this had time to clean up the scene. But the Johnsons still had one nagging question. Why? Why was someone willing to go to such lengths to cover up what had happened to their son? The answer came in the form of another anonymous tip, a voice message left on Jackie's phone. The voice, muffled but firm, said, "It's bigger than you think. Stop looking at the kids. Start looking at their parents." Grant dug deeper into the families of the boys Kendrick had clashed with. What he found was startling. One of the boys' fathers had a history of protecting his sons from legal trouble. And more importantly, he had close ties to the local law enforcement. "The connections go all the way up," Grant explained. "This isn't just about a school fight. This is about power." As protests gained momentum, civil rights organizations stepped in, amplifying the Johnsons' fight for justice. Media coverage exploded, putting immense pressure on local authorities to reopen the case. But with the increased attention came increased threats. One night, as Kenneth drove home alone, a black SUV followed him for miles. When he turned onto a side road, the SUV sped up and swerved dangerously close to his car before peeling away. The message was clear: back off. Despite the intimidation, the Johnsons pushed forward. Then, an anonymous source provided a bombshell, a detailed report suggesting that Kendrick may have overheard something incriminating involving the boys and their father. It was something they couldn't afford to let slip, and Kendrick, being who he was, wouldn't have stayed quiet. "Maybe he knew too much," Jackie whispered, her voice heavy with emotion. "Maybe that's why she couldn't finish the sentence." As the pressure mounted, the authorities reluctantly agreed to release additional surveillance footage from the gym. But what they released was heavily edited, raising even more questions. Protesters called it a slap in the face, and the Johnsons grew more resolute. Then came the final blow. Late one night, Grant received a phone call from a source who claimed to know exactly what had happened. The source described a confrontation between Kendrick and one of the boys in the gym, a fight that escalated when others joined in. "It wasn't supposed to go that far," the source said, "but once it did, they knew they had to cover it up. Their dad made sure of it." Grant recorded the call and turned it over to the Johnsons, but just as they were preparing to take the evidence to court, the source disappeared. The phone number was disconnected, and their home was abandoned. The Johnsons were left with damning evidence, but no clear path forward. They knew who was responsible. They knew who had protected them. But the system seemed impenetrable, fortified by connections and corruption. Then, just as they were preparing for another press conference, Kenneth found another note on their doorstep. This one was chillingly direct. You're closer than you think. Stop now, or pay the price. The Johnsons refuse to be silenced. They can threaten us all they want, Jackie said, tears glistening in her eyes. But we'll never stop fighting for Kendrick. As they stood on the brink of exposing the truth, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a fight for Kendrick anymore. It was a fight against an entire system, one determined to bury the truth no matter the cost. And somewhere, someone was watching, waiting to see if they could finish what they started, or if the Johnsons could finally shatter the web of lies. Months turned into years, but the Johnsons' fight for justice never wavered. The case, once dismissed as an accident, had become a national conversation about systemic corruption, cover-ups, and the lengths people would go to protect their own. Despite mounting evidence, altered surveillance footage, missing organs, and testimonies pointing to foul play, no arrests were ever made. The Johnsons filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the school and law enforcement, but the case was dismissed on a technicality. Insufficient evidence, the judge ruled, even as the public cried foul. The media frenzy began to die down, and the town settled back into an uneasy silence. But the Johnsons refused to let Kendrick's memory fade. Jackie became a powerful voice for other families who had lost loved ones to mysterious or suspicious circumstances. She spoke at rallies, on television, and at town halls. "We're not just fighting for Kendrick," she said in one interview. "We're fighting for every family who's been denied justice." Years later, a breakthrough came, but it wasn't the resolution anyone had hoped for. A full, unedited version of the gym surveillance footage was anonymously uploaded to the internet. Investigators and amateur sleuths alike dissected the video frame by frame, searching for answers. And then they found it. In the corner of one frame, just as Kendrick walked into the gym, a shadowy figure lingered near the entrance. The figure's identity couldn't be made out, but their presence raised chilling questions. Who were they? Why hadn't this been mentioned in the original investigation? The revelation reignited public interest, but it wasn't enough to reopen the case. The system had buried the truth too deeply, leaving the Johnsons with more questions than answers. In the final moments of their public fight, the Johnsons received one last chilling message. A voicemail left on their home phone played a distorted voice saying, "You're closer than you think. Keep looking." Even as the story ended, the mystery lingered. The truth about Kendrick Johnson's death remained elusive, a tragic reminder of a system designed to protect some and fail others. But one thing was certain: the Johnsons' fight had sparked a movement, one that refused to let Kendrick's name be forgotten.